stage, Andrew Legrand.
Thank you. So this is Supercharge your practice with Zapier. Quick show of hands, who's a Clio user in here? Okay, hands down. And who uses Zapier? Who's heard about Zapier? Okay, great. So my talk here today, I hope to accomplish is I'm a practicing attorney in New Orleans, and I'll explain that, but I want to show you how I use Clio and Zapier together and how I use that to supercharge my practice. I have some few videos in here. We're going to get some demonstrations, and at the end of the show, I'll give you a link so you can go and download these slides, and hopefully you can implement this. So quickly, who am I? As I said, I'm a lawyer in New Orleans, Louisiana. I help small business owners, business partnerships, the various issues that come up when you own a small business. I've been a Clio user since I started my law firm. I graduated in 2011, practiced for 2011. Very early in 2012, realized I needed a way to manage my practice. I started using Clio very early on. I started using Zapier kind of when it came on the scene in late 2012, and the two have been integrated now for almost a year and a half. I was an early beta tester when Clio was trying to figure out how they could use Zapier. And I'm a paperless cloud-based and automation kind of geek nerd. I like this stuff. So the only reason I know about this stuff is because I enjoy doing it, I like doing it, and it helps make my practice better. To go over a little bit of a roadmap as far as what we're going to talk about today, first I'm going to explain what Zapier is and what I mean when I'm going to say we're going to supercharge Clio. Next, this is a mastery course, right? This is at 102 level, so we're actually going to go into some nuts and bolts. So I hope I don't lose a few of you, but I might. And then finally, I'm going to give you some practical tips that you can use to go home and implement this. So first of all, what is Zapier? What is he saying up there? So you look at the name of this app. Something to remember is that I'm from New Orleans. I always wanted to say Zapier and put a weird kind of ring to it, right? My friend Jason over here one day pointed out, he says, Andrew, on their website it says Zapier makes you happier. Really easy way to remember how to pronounce it. But it's cool if you notice in the name here, they have this middle section, this API, and the API is the magic behind this app. I'm not going to go into what an API is too deep, but what we need to know is an API is a way of moving data from one place to another. It's a way that apps talk. It's a common language that they have. So Zapier takes advantage of APIs to work and to communicate and makes apps communicate. And it's got a couple of building blocks that I want to introduce you to, just so you understand a little bit of the lingo. Zapier is based off of a series of, you create a trigger, you add some actions, and together that's going to create a zap. So trigger, one or several actions, and then that is a zap. So when I say triggers and zaps, you know what I mean. And this is what the screen is going to look like when we get into Zapier. You can see at the top we have triggers, we have actions, and together this whole thing, when we give it a name and turn it on, is going to be called a zap. So what can we do with them? What is supercharging Clio? What does that mean? So most of us in here are Clio users, or we're familiar with Clio, we know what it is. And we also know that Clio doesn't do everything to run our law practices. We still need to generate documents, we still need to have accounting, we still need to manage those documents, we need calendars. And luckily, Clio has recognized that, and they've integrated with a lot of pieces of software that do a lot of those cool things. They've integrated with Office and Contacts, and they've tried to make that a natural, easy fit. Well, if you're an advanced Clio user, you also probably use some other apps. Apps that they don't necessarily integrate with, but apps that you want to use. Something to do your email, something to manage your tasks, social media, something to communicate with your clients. So the question becomes, okay, so I've integrated Clio with everything they naturally integrate with, but there's still these other apps over here that I still want to use and get some benefit out of. So how do I connect those two? How do I make all that work so I'm not doing manual data entry? And of course, that's why I'm here to talk about Zapier. Zapier is an app that allows app integrators to integrate into it, or developers from other apps to connect to Zapier. And so far, over 500 different apps integrate with Zapier. A lot of them you heard of, some of them you probably haven't heard of. In fact, most of them you probably haven't heard of. But the idea of supercharging Clio is that by taking Clio and connecting it with Zapier, we have access to these 500 apps to take advantage and make our practices more streamlined. So let me go into just a few quick examples to show you what I mean when I'm talking about supercharging Clio. So I use Google Apps to manage my practice calendar, that sort of thing. When I create a new Clio matter, I need a spot to store all those emails. So one example might be I want to create a label within Gmail when I create a new Clio matter, so that as emails come in from the client, opposing counsel, wherever, I have a place to store those. Another example might be, now that I have that label, and I'm getting that email, and as I get that email, I attach that email to a label, well, let me go add a time entry for that email within Clio. Another example might be, I really love Evernote. I think it's easy to get notes into it. It allows me to do formatting and checkboxes and store videos and images and PDFs. It's great to have open there when I'm doing an initial consultation and taking in a lot of information. So I want to create notebooks for each of my new Clio matters so that as I'm taking notes, as I have phone calls, consultations, meetings with my client, I have a space to put all those pieces of information. So Zapier can help me manage all these things and connect all this. So now we have a few examples. I really want to show you how Zapier works, how you actually build a Zap. So we're going to get into some nuts and bolts here. So when you log into Zapier, this is the screen that you're faced with. And in the top right, this big orange button, Make a Zap. So we're going to click this, and this is an actual video of me making a Zap. So you choose by starting your trigger, you choose your app, and I'm going to start with Clio. And you can see that Clio gives me these options. There's a whole bunch of triggers. And I'm going to select my trigger. Here I'm selecting New Matter. You select the account you want to connect to, so you have to connect and authorize and do all that sort of stuff. You can set some options in there, and then you click Done. And you go and get some test data. And you can see that what happens here is that Clio sends over a whole bunch of test data, and pretty much every little data point from that matter, Clio is sending into Zapier. And that means I can do something with this data. Sending over the matter description, the responsible attorney, all sorts of information that you might not even want to do anything with, but it's basically sending over every piece of data that Clio has related to that matter is now in Zapier, and I can send it to other apps to do things. The list actually goes on. I only scrolled about halfway down because there got to be some client confidential information, and I said, okay, they get the point. I'll move on from that. And so this is really cool, right? What can we do with this? And you might have noticed in that settings thing, there was that option for, what is the matter status? And I kind of want to give you just a little bit of a warning here, right? And point something out to you real quick. So you see on that matter status, when we went to edit options, there was this drop-down menu that said, what is the matter status? Pending, open, closed. And when I first started using Zapier, I thought, oh, I can do something when the matter changes from pending to open, or from open to closed. That's really useful. I can do those things. Well, that's not what this is. This is a filter. So one of the limitations of Zapier, so to say, is that the triggers only work on the first time that something happens. So when I go into create matter, create new, and set it up, that's the only time that this trigger, that this Zap is going to work. It's not going to work when I update that matter. It's not going to work when I when I change the matter status from open to closed, or open to pending, or pending to open, whatever way I'm going. So this is a filter that says the Zap is only going to continue if the matter has that status to start with. The solution to this, by the way, is go upstairs and annoy the developers about adding webhooks. As you start working with this, you'll find out why webhooks are so cool and how much more we can do with them, but you might not even know what that means, but go ask the developers for webhooks, and we'll do a lot more. But let's kind of go back to that example. And now we're going to add our action. We're going to add our action that creates a Gmail label for that matter. So we're going to choose our app. We're going to choose Gmail. And you can see here there's this little button, show me more options. I'm going to select create label. And then I'm going to select my account. You can connect multiple accounts to these kind of things. Okay, keep going. And then finally, it's going to say, okay, what do you want to call that label that you're creating? And this is where Zapier is magic, because it's going to go back and get all that data that Clio sent and say, you can use that data that Clio sent me and take that description of the matter that I've created within Clio and create the label within Gmail. So the matter descriptions that I have in Clio that you custom format can now be labels within Gmail, so everything looks the same. Right? That the format that you have in your firm will look in the label, and Clio is fully customizable. And this is just kind of a trick. You see here that I have this exclamation point M slash. What that means is I've created a parent label, which is exclamation point because it's at the top, and M short for matters. And then there's sub-labels where all my matters are. So if you use Google Apps or Gmail, you know on the left there's that section of labels. All these labels for all my matters, everyone that's created is now a child of this parent one. So they're all nice and organized. And what this does for me is that as I'm getting matters, I can label them, and now I can go back to that label and see that entire chain of communications that I've had with anyone related to that matter. So that's probably one of the most useful things that you can do with Zapier. And I mean, that was a live speed example. And it took me 3 minutes to set up. And there weren't that many options. There's not a whole lot of ways you can mess that up. So that's something you can go home and implement or do it now at lunch within like 5 minutes. And there's just a couple last steps we have to take to get this to actually work every time we create a new matter. And they're really not that complicated. First, we have to go in the top right, and we have to turn our matter on. And then we have to go back and give our matter, or give this Zap some sort of name. And that's it. We're done. And now whenever we create a new matter, because we've connected Clio, we've connected Gmail, it's going to create this label in Gmail for us to store our emails. But remember how I said you could add actions, not just one, but multiple? Let's chain that, right? Because when we create a new matter, we don't necessarily just want to create a label. We might want to create that Evernote notebook, so we have a spot to go and drop all our notes and our communications with the clients. If you manage a team, or if you just use GTD, get things done like yourself, maybe you want to create a project or a dashboard or whatever you will, and whatever project management app you're using, a place to put the tasks related to that client and that matter. I use Asana, so I create a project in Asana for me to put tasks. I create a task in that project to do stuff, right? I need to bill the client. I need to make sure they paid, sign an engagement letter, made their trust deposit, whatever it might be. So this is all just triggering again off of create new matter, done, and all this is happening in the background within minutes. I add the client to my CRM and drop them into a drip cart campaign, an active campaign with some of my policies. And emails them and say, hey, thanks for becoming a client. Here's our communications policy. Here's our text messaging policy. Here's our billing policy. And so I'm able to train my clients not just by giving them one sheet of paper, but by sending them a few emails, one a day or one every other day, by triggering something else happening in another app. I can take all that data and store it in a Google Sheet, and this is where like almost level 2 of this course is putting it somewhere else so I can reference it later. And then finally, send a notification to the firm and say, hey, guess what? We just signed up a new client. We opened this new matter. Here's all the details. So here's what all of that looks like when you put it into Zapier. Right? Here's an actual screen, and again, here's the actual video demonstration of what's all going on here. So again, we've created the label. We've already done this. I'm just adding on to the Zap. I don't need to go create a new one. I'm just adding on, and I'm actually not going to do it. And here, again, I mentioned you can download this later, so don't worry about taking too many notes. I'm going to allow you to download some of these videos so you can go home and view them later and see what settings that I have set up here. But again, it's all very easily customizable. So send an email, create this project, create this task within the project, create my notebook that I'm using for Evernote, call it the display number that I've set in Clio, and then go add everything into a Google Sheet so I have this database that links the Evernote ID of the notebook to the Clio Matter ID, to the Asana Project Manager ID, and links all that together, and now I can do things in the back end as I'm in those different apps. Let me give you a few more examples of some of the more useful Zaps that I have. I'm a solo practitioner, so I work by myself. So when I have a Clio expense, I need to write a check for a client. What I do is I go into Clio and create an expense, and Zapier creates it'll shoot over to Xero a bill that needs to be paid. So I can go and jump over to Xero and click Pay Bill, and it'll allow me to print a check.
So this is another video demonstrating what that is. I think that video already ran, but you can see here that, no, here we go. Zapier also lets you write some JavaScript. So I don't want to scare you too much, but show you how powerful this is. Now, I don't consider myself a coder, but I also had to learn how to write a little JavaScript to clean some of these things up. And again, does it take time to learn some of these things? Yes, but does it save me time? Absolutely. Because now when I've created that expense, it's already accounted for within Xero itself. And I'm not waiting for it to hit my bank account, but I'm already accounting for it as soon as I enter it. This is kind of another more complicated one. I have clients, business clients, who I charge the same amount to on a monthly basis. And by doing that, what I say is, OK, you give me the right to charge your credit card every month. And what happens with a lot of them is their credit card gets stolen, the number gets replaced, but the card gets declined. And they might get an email from LawPay saying, hey, Spera Law tried to charge your card, and it got declined. But I wanted to follow up on that. I wanted to send them what looked like a personalized email saying, hey, I tried to run your card, and it got declined. Well, the problem with that is that every time that happened, I was going and I was finding the client's email and writing that and saying, hey, your card was declined. Here's the link to go pay. This is what you owe. This is the bill, yada, yada, yada. So I created a Zap in just a few minutes that actually looked for when a payment failed from LawPay and created a draft email in Gmail with some standard language saying this was the amount we tried to charge, this is where you can go pay it. So it's not sending it automatically, but it's creating a draft. And this is how I did that. So this is also kind of a more advanced step. And this is an example that uses webhooks. And what a webhook is a webhook is a way of a website listening for a signal from another website. It's like, hey, I'm going to set up this URL, and I'm going to listen for you to do something. So we can do that we started by going into Zapier, and our trigger here is catch hook. So catch something, set up a listening point, set up a URL that I can trigger, that I can do something with, that Zapier is listening to, and then do something when you hear something. So my trigger here is webhooks by Zapier, and my action is catch this hook, and Zapier says, OK, here's the URL. Here's the URL that we're going to listen to for your data. And so you copy that to your clipboard, and this is LawPay settings. If you're using Clio and LawPay, that integration's great. It's beautiful, right? But go into the settings over here. And again, this is a video, and you go to the settings in the top right, and then you click Developer, and you scroll down to this little thing called webhooks. It's kind of hidden. And you paste that URL down into LawPay. And so what happens is that anytime there's a LawPay transaction, LawPay's sending that information, not the full credit card number, just the last four, the amount charged, the address, some of that information, and it's hitting that Zapier listening point. It's hitting that webhook. And so now what I'm setting up is I needed to do a little JavaScript. The information it sent over was raw, so I needed to transform that information and make it useful for me. I had to set up a filter here. That's what this only continue if a certain field that you received is failed. Right? I don't need to create a draft email every time there's a charge, but only if that charge's status was failed. And go find the client, go find the person who's associated with that charge. And finally, go create a draft email. Go into my account and set up a draft email that says, hey, client so-and-so, by the way, this is what happened. Use all these custom fields to generate an email that's pretty much ready to send, where all I have to do is go hit the send button. It looks very personalized. It looks professional. I can format it how I want. But at the same time, it's a very easy way and quick way for me to go follow up on that client whose card was declined because it got stolen last week. Recurring billing. This is one that I've kind of set up recently, too. Along the lines of those monthly clients, if you want to bill clients the same amount every month. What I was doing before was, at the beginning of the month, I would go find my recurring clients. I would figure out how much I'm charging them per month. I would go create that time entry 1 hour times your monthly rate, whatever that might be, enter some notes, generate the bill, go charge them. And I was looking for ways to automate that, to make that quicker, to save myself time. And what I realized is that I could use the trigger of, well, when I create a bill, just create a time entry now for that amount for the next month. So that way when I create the bill at the end of the next month, the time entry is already there. So this saves me, I have maybe a half dozen or 8 or so clients that are on a monthly package, and this saves me probably close to 15 minutes each billing cycle. And what this app is doing, it says, when a new bill is created, go look in that Google Sheet where I stored all the information. I have to program the monthly amount in, find out if there's a monthly amount there, figure out what their monthly charge is, only continue if there's an amount in that column for the monthly charge, and then go and create the time entry. And so as soon as I bill that client and send them the bill and charge them for that month's services, the time entry representing the next month's charges has already been created. And again, this is, I don't know, an hour's worth of work to set this up and figure this out, but it's saving me 15 minutes every month. And I mentioned earlier, hey, when you get the email, go create a time entry for that email in the appropriate manner. Now, I don't necessarily always bill my clients for each and every email they send me. I don't want to look like I'm trying to nickel and dime them for short and sweet emails. But what I realize is that by creating the time entry, first of all, if I actually want to charge them for that email, I don't have to go create the time entry myself. It's just there, and I have to go and update it and make sure I bill them for it. But at the same time, when I send them the bill, every email they've sent me, or at least the subject and the to and from fields, is going to be on that bill. So I'm showing the line items on the bill that I'm charging them for, and at the same time, every email that they've sent me is being accounted for, so they see, oh wow, I've emailed him a lot. He's actually done a lot of work for me this month because I've been emailing him 20 times. And so what this is my trigger here is look for a search. The search is if the email has user labels. And a user label is Gmail's term for a label that you've created. They have system labels and they have user labels. System label is a sent or inbox or whatever, or spam, whatever it might be, the default ones. For us, the user labels was that one that I created in that first step when I created the label. That's a user label. So look for those emails. When those emails come in, we need to run a little bit of JavaScript because we need to determine what matter it's attached to. We need to search and figure out, okay, it was labeled with this label. Oh, that looks like it's a label that belongs to a matter. Let's parse that out. And again, running filters to clean it up. And what's cool about Zapier is that you can come back and add these. So sometimes you create a Zap, and it looks like it's working, and then something happens and breaks it. And it's really easy to kind of go in there and diagnose what's happened and look at the history and come back and fix it later on and just add a filter or add another step. So these are all kind of living and breathing and continuing to change as I use them based upon what's happening. I think actually I was sitting in a session earlier today, and I looked and I checked, and a bunch of zaps had triggered when I didn't want them to. And so it literally took me about 3 minutes to go in and say, okay, I need to add a filter and make sure that this particular data point says this so that these actions aren't happening, so my whatever it was isn't getting spammed with all these inappropriate messages. So I just amended and updated that zap to do that. So those are all examples. Again, I'm going to give you some instructions on how to download those so you can watch those, pause, and play them, and slow them down. But finally, I want to give you some practical tips, especially if you're a new Zapier user, on how to get the most out of it. So again, this is the main screen that you see when you log into Zapier. First, this is kind of their Explore area. And what this is they have every app that they connect to listed here. So the first thing you want to do is search for the apps that you use the most out of. Gmail, Outlook, Clio, MailChimp, whatever it might be, and just go and connect them. Search in that search bar, find them, click on them, say, set up my account, connect your account, authorize it, do all that sort of stuff. See what their triggers are, see what their actions are, and just kind of get the wheels turning of, oh, I can do that with that. It's going to tell me when I create a new matter. It's going to tell me when there's a new tweet matching this. It's going to tell me when there's a whatever it is. So use this explore function. And this is also useful, too, to kind of just explore what apps they're connecting to. You know, there's 500 apps in here that do everything from Clio managing a law practice to very simple things like just sending text messages. So I encourage you to kind of scroll through here and see what it integrates with. Because remember, you can connect Clio to all of these. And identify pain points. You know, do a conscious job of figuring out what am I doing over and over and over again? What is a repetitive task that takes time out of my day? Write that down, and then go back into Zapier and say, okay, well, is there something I can do here? I mean, a lot of these apps I created were because of pain points that I had. The one about creating a bill in Xero seems silly, but a pain point was that I would have to write a check to advance some costs for a client, and I'd have to go and enter the bill and enter the expense in Clio so I can bill them for it, and then go over to Xero and write it there so I can print out a check and do all that sort of stuff, and realize that was a pain point. It sucked to do that. So by setting up the Zap, I was able to save myself the tedious task of doing that. So look for those pain points. Second, if you're app shopping, review the Zapier integration. See if they do that. Melly and I were talking earlier. She's a real estate agent, a real estate closing attorney here in Chicago, and she uses an e-signing app a lot, and we're talking about making her process easier. And right now she's using DocuSign, which doesn't integrate with Zapier. And we said, well, maybe if you shop around, you might find an e-signature platform that integrates with Zapier that actually allows you to streamline some of these things. So if you're looking for a new app, maybe it's e-signatures, maybe it's online scheduling, maybe it's a way to keep in touch with your clients, like a Constant Contact or a MailChimp. If you're app shopping for a certain category, one way to compare the different apps is to come into Zapier and see how they compare. And to me, I've done this a couple times where I've eliminated apps. I was looking for a scheduling platform and was able to eliminate about 3/4 of them because they didn't have a Zapier integration. So I realized that as people were scheduling things, they'd be stuck in this one place, whereas the scheduling apps that did have a Zapier integration, I knew I'd be able to do something with that information, with that client data. So look at that Zapier integration as you're planning to purchase something new. Experiment. Have a little bit of fun with this. It's really kind of exciting to have to do a tedious task and then fix it, and then make sure every time it works and it's perfect, it's predictable. You don't have to pay someone to do it. You don't have to remind someone to do it. So play around with these sorts of things. Again, connect those apps, see what their triggers are and their actions. And then finally, my last tip is provide feedback to developers. Go back to Clio, go back to the people that are using the other apps that you use, and let them know, hey, I'm trying to do this with Zapier, and this isn't working. I've had a lot of success going back to developers and saying, hey, this is a bug, or I'm trying to do X, Y, Z, and it's not working because of this. Can you add this? And honestly, the vast majority of the time, I've gotten a developer to come back and say, okay, I'll fix that for you, or it's done, or okay, now you've opened up the possibilities of what we can do with Zapier. So provide that feedback back to the developers because they value that and they actually will listen and change things. So that is Zapier and how to supercharge your practice with Zapier and Clio. Thank you so much for coming. If you want to download these videos and the slides, send a text to Supercharge Clio is the only thing you put in the text to 33444. I'll ask for your email address and then I'll shoot over that presentation to you. And feel free to ask if you have any questions. Thank you so much.